His nails and fingers cut open with the pressure. Raw flesh and blood came out of his wounds as he went on. But I still couldn't see his face. I was thinking to stop this child from hurting himself like this when the boy placed the ice cream in the pit he just dug up and buried it with soil again. I couldn't watch anymore, so I came out from the bushes screaming. "What are you doing? Are you all right?" For the first time, the boy lifted up his cold wind shivering down my spine. The kid had no eyes. Instead of his eyeballs, dark hollow eye sockets stared at me. A painful expression appeared on his face and he said,
"I want to go home, but no matter how much I dig to come out, I always end up here."
And vanished in the air, right in front of my eyes. I fell to the floor with a huge shock. My mouth opened in shock and my heart stopped in fear. Sweat appeared on my forehead as I tried to make out what just happened a few seconds earlier. I can't explain how I picked myself up that day and returned home. The next day, when I went to that park, I saw cops near the park and it was sealed like a crime scene. A small crowd gathered on the sidewalk and watched this entire situation. Out of confusion, I asked the man standing in the crowd, "What's going on here?" He said in a restless voice, "They have traced a missing kid from last month. It seemed like someone abducted this kid for ransom and later murdered him. An old woman came to jog in the morning when her dog dug up that ground under the tree. That's when she saw a small hand lurking beneath the soil. Look, there he is." I followed the man's eyes and saw the paramedic taking away a corpse of a small child dressed exactly like that little boy. The corpse had no eyes, which supposedly got eaten by maggots. The body has been there for months, so its rotten smell made the air heavy. Everyone covered their nose, and some even walked away to avoid vomiting. It came to know that the boy's babysitter brought him to the park and later abducted him, asking for ransom from his parents. When they threatened her, saying she will never get away with this, the cruel woman strangled the boy and buried his body under that tree. The most shocking part was the kid was alive when she buried him. He fainted with the trauma and pressure on his neck, but when he regained consciousness, he found himself buried under the ground. He tried to come out while digging the soil, but choked to death during that struggle. His nails were all broken as he suffered silently. Now I actually understand what that kid meant when he said, "I want to go home, but no matter how much I dig to come out, I always end up here." The poor kid's soul was trapped here for a month, and all he wanted was to go home. I hope this kid is finally resting in peace. And to that babysitter, may she rot in jail for her entire life.
Okay. I don't have YouTube Premium. Guys, I don't have YouTube Premium.
Hey guys, I see many of you commenting on my videos that this channel deserves 1 million subscribers. But I also see the percent of people who watch my videos aren't actually subscribed to the channel. So, if you like the content, want to support my channel, and want to see this channel reach 1 million subscribers, or maybe 500,000 subscribers, then go ahead, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. It's free, and you can always change your mind later.
It happened when I was 13. I was in the 8th grade at the time. I remember the time well, as a lot of kids had been going missing from our neighborhood. I remember the first child to go missing. His name was Matthew Smith, and he was our neighbor's son. It gave me a lot of trauma going to school the next day and not seeing one of my classmates. The weird activities had also put our town in fear, as the cops had no idea where the kids were or who was taking them. But amidst the horror of it all, there was a ray of hope that appeared as a shining light for us kids. And that ray of hope was Mr. Williams' ice cream truck. Mr. Williams was a man who regularly sold ice cream to our neighborhood. Every time I came back home from school, his ice cream truck would always be packed with kids. And while I believed he was a good man, most things about Mr. Williams was odd. First of all, he didn't drive a normal ice cream truck, as the vehicle he drove looked more like an RV than a truck, as it was much bigger than regular ice cream trucks. Secondly, he always had this weird, ecstatic look on his face every time he saw children. As I remember the first time I met him, and he looked at me with wanting eyes like I was a treat. Finally, last weird thing about Mr. Williams was the distinct taste of his ice cream. It's really hard to explain, but you know how vanilla ice cream tastes the same regardless of which store you buy it from? Well, No other ice cream tasted like the one made by Mr. Williams, as whatever ingredients he used gave his own ice cream its own unique taste. And it was still sweet at the same time. I don't know what was in it, but I always craved the distinct taste of his particular ice cream. And I knew I wasn't alone, as every other kid always wanted it too. Visiting his truck soon became a tradition for me, till a weird occurrence that happened one afternoon. I had just come back from school, and as usual, I went to get some ice cream at Mr. Williams' truck. It was pretty crowded, as other kids were rushing to get theirs, so I decided to wait out the frenzy by going to the back of the truck. As I stood there waiting, I began to hear muffled noises coming from the back of the truck. I got curious, so I started to walk towards the truck so that I could try to make out what the noises were. I reached the door and I was about to place my ear on the door. I heard a loud, guttury scream come from the truck. The scream startled me, so I immediately arched back and fell on the floor. I was confused and scared at the same time as I began to ask myself, why was there a scream coming from the...
Edit it! Zoom in! Is that me? That looks something like me. Okay, guys.
At first I thought Mr. Williams was in trouble, but as I began to think more deeply, I realized that the high-pitched scream belonged to a child. Numerous thoughts started running through my head as I sat down there, too scared to move. Eventually, everything became quiet as the screams of the excited kids rushing for ice cream had died down. As I got up to move, that's when the back of the ice cream truck opened up and Mr. Williams walked out. As he saw me sitting down on the floor, he looked at me with concerned eyes and said, "Tracy, isn't it?" I was still scared, so I didn't answer. He then continued with, "What happened to you? Did you fall down? You look pale, as if you've seen a ghost." I still didn't answer, but I just did the first thing that popped into my mind, and I bolted. I ran all the way to my house, and I locked the door behind me. That night, I went to bed with only one question on my mind. Who was the child who screamed in the back of Mr. Williams' truck? Throughout the following week, I avoided Mr. Williams' truck, as I was still a bit scared due to the incident. With every passing day, I delved deeper into my thoughts as I felt my curiosity eating at me. The next day, when I came back from school, I quietly slipped out of the house and I made my way to Mr. Williams' van. As usual, it was really crowded and busy, so amidst all the rowdiness, I found my way to the back of the truck. The doors were closed. I stood there for about 30 minutes with my thoughts, and I eventually gave up. I didn't hear anything, so I turned my back to leave. And that's when Mr. Williams emerged from the back of the truck. He was taking out what seemed to be trash, and as he walked down the streets to where our garbage cans were situated, I noticed the door was slightly left ajar. I knew I had heard nothing while I was waiting, but something told me to take a peek inside just to clear all doubts. So I walked forward and I peeked into the van. It was pretty dark inside and I couldn't see anything, so I decided to get in and take a better look. So I walked in. The inside of the van looked like a small room, but I decided to take out my phone and use its torch to look around. At first, I was confused as to what I was seeing, as posters and pictures of little children were plastered all over the walls. There were notes all over the place, and everything seemed wrong about the scene. I began to walk forward when I felt something brush my leg. I looked down to see I had passed a slightly large dog cage. I was about to peer in to see if I was brushed by the paw of the dog, and that's when I saw a little human hand pressed against the cage. I was shocked, so I instinctively arched back. I knew I had seen a child's hand, but I had to make sure, so I summoned the courage and I peered in. That's when I saw a young, gagged child stuffed inside the cage. I held myself from screaming and I began to back away. It didn't take long before I bumped into something. I quickly turned around to see an extra 4 cages. Each of them held more gagged children inside. Before I could scream, the lights came on and I heard Mr. Williams' voice say, "I see you found my children, Tracy." I slowly turned around to see crazy-looking Mr. Williams smiling at me. Now that the room was properly lit, saw numerous cages with...
Switch to Square and join over 4 million businesses worldwide. Switch to Fast Setup.
tired, injured little children who were all gagged and whimpering inside them. "What is this, Mr. Williams?" "So it's you who's taking all the kids away," I blurted out. "Taking?" he asked. No. You see, Tracy, these kids came to me. I didn't take anyone." "Liar," I screamed back. "It's obvious that you took them. But why? Why would you do such a thing?" I asked him in tears. "Why would I?" he shouted back at me, obviously frustrated. Why would life give the beautiful gift of children to everyone but me? I'd be a great father. I've always loved kids, but I can't have them. It hurt me deeply, but I wasn't going to bitch about it, so I decided to collect them, to take them by force. And as you can see, I have amassed quite the collection. He spoke like the children weren't living, breathing human beings. He spoke like they were memorabilia, and it was one of the most horrible and horrific things I had ever heard. When he was done speaking, a tense silence filled the van. I tried to move forward, but he blocked my way. I stuttered. "But please let me go." And that's when he replied, "I'm afraid I can't let you do that. You see, I've had my eye on you for a while now, Tracy, and I think you'd make a great addition to my collection." And before I could reply to the morbid statement, he lunged at me. I instinctively threw my phone at him. It hit him in the eye, and he began to scream. With no hesitation, I bolted and I ran all the way home. When I told my mom everything that happened, and she immediately called the cops. When the cops arrived, they couldn't find Mr. Williams. No one could, as he had completely vanished. The incident traumatized me for the rest of my childhood. But with a lot of therapy, I moved on. Although I always jump at the sound of an ice cream truck, as I know Mr. Williams is still out there collecting children and spreading his ice cream. I loved ice cream as a kid. I mean, what kid doesn't? I lived in a hot state too, so for kids in my town, hearing the ice cream truck jingle after a day hard